The moving truck couldn't make the last turn onto Perrin Street. So the two men unloaded my life onto the sidewalk and left it there in the drizzle while I signed things on a clipboard. I remember thinking the boxes looked smaller outside. In the apartment on Delancey, they'd stacked to the ceiling and I'd spent a year sidestepping them. Out here, under a sky the color of dishwater, they came up to my knee. 31 years, and a man named Curtis could fit it on a dolly in 4 trips. "You want these in by the door or you carrying them yourself?" Curtis asked. He had a kindness about the eyes that didn't match the rest of him, which was all forearm and complaint. "By the door's fine." "Rain's coming harder." "By the door's fine," I said again, because I didn't want him in the house. I didn't want anyone in the house yet. It wasn't mine in any way that felt earned. The bank owned most of it, and the previous owner had died in the back bedroom, which the realtor mentioned only after I'd signed, in the tone people use for weather. Marren Bay had been my grandmother's idea, though she'd been dead 11 years and had never once said the words out loud. She used to send my mother postcards from a town like this, clapboard houses leaning toward the water, a lighthouse that no longer lit anything, a diner with a name that was a pun on a fish. I'd found the postcards in a shoebox after my mother went, and when the city finally became the kind of place I couldn't breathe in, I put a pin in the map more or less where the postmarks came from. That's the whole reason. There isn't a better one. People want you to have a better one, a job waiting, a man waiting, some brave, clean narrative, and I let them think what they needed to, and I moved to a town I'd chosen off the back of dead women's postcards. The house was narrow and blue and needed paint. There was a porch swing with one chain longer than the other, so it hung at a tilt, patient, like it was waiting to see if I'd notice. I noticed. I sat on it that first afternoon with the boxes still in the hall and let it list me sideways, and I thought, okay, this is where I'll be no one for a while. That was the plan, to be no one. To teach a little piano to whoever the town produced, to let the salt eat the rest of the city out of me, to reach an evening eventually where I could sit with a cup of something and not feel the specific weight of October coming. I lasted 6 days as no one. The music school, if you could call it that, was 2 rooms above the hardware store, rented to me by a man named Peel who owned half the buildings on Water Street and wore his reading glasses on a chain like a librarian in an old film. He'd advertised for a teacher for a year. The last one had left to get married in Portland, and the children of Marren Bay had gone unmusical in the interim, which Peel seemed to take as a civic wound. "They're feral now," he warned me, unlocking the door. "The Hendry boy hasn't touched a scale since spring. And there's a few I'll be honest with you about. They've got no ear at all, God bless them, but the mothers pay and the mothers are the point." The room smelled of dust and old varnish. There was an upright piano the color of dark honey, missing the low A and with a middle pedal that did nothing, and a window that looked down onto the street. And I stood at that window the first morning and watched the town wake up and thought I might, against all my planning, be all right. My first student was a boy of 9 who played with his tongue out and cried when he got it wrong, and I liked him immediately. The second was a girl whose mother stayed in the doorway the entire lesson taking notes. The third canceled. The fourth was Lucy. I want to be careful here because I know how it ends, and the temptation is to go back and lay her first over everything like a filter, to say the light changed when she came up the stairs, to give the moment a music it didn't have yet. It didn't have any music. She was just a kid. She came up the stairs ahead of a woman I took for her mother and turned out to be her aunt, and she had a scab on her knee and a front tooth missing, and a way of looking at the piano like it might bite. "This is Lucy," the aunt said. Her name was Deb. I'd learned Deb Marsh, and she had the harried competence of a woman doing 3 people's jobs. "She's 7. She's well. She's musical, we think. She hums all the time, drives her father up the wall. We thought better a teacher than us." "I don't hum all the time," Lucy said to the floor. "You hum in your sleep," Deb said. That's different. I crouched to Lucy's level, which is a thing you learn to do or don't. Do you want to be here? I asked her. Not the mother, not the aunt, her. She considered it with the seriousness of a small judge. I want to see inside the piano, she said finally. So I opened the lid and showed her the hammers and the felt and the wires strung tight as a harp, and she went very quiet, the good kind of quiet, the kind that means someone is actually looking. And she reached one finger toward the strings and stopped and looked at me for permission, and I nodded, and she plucked a wire, and the sound bloomed up out of the wood and filled the little room. And she laughed, a real laugh, surprised out of her. And behind me Deb let out a breath like she'd been holding it for a year. She likes you, Deb said in the doorway afterward while Lucy pressed keys at random. You should know that's not nothing, she doesn't. Deb stopped herself, rearranged whatever she'd been about to say. She's careful with people, since she's just careful. So, we had a good first lesson, I said, which wasn't a lesson at all. It was a girl and a piano and 40 minutes of me not teaching her anything. And it was the best 40 minutes I'd had in longer than I wanted to count. Thursdays, Deb asked. Thursdays, I said. And that should have been all. A student, a good one, the kind you're grateful for. I didn't ask about the father Deb had mentioned twice. I didn't ask why a 7-year-old was careful with people or what the sense was that Deb had swallowed. You don't, in a new town. You take the pieces people hand you and you don't reach for the ones they keep behind their back. I'd moved 1,100 miles precisely so that no one would reach for mine. I wanted on the record that I didn't go looking. Whatever comes after, and a great deal comes after, I didn't go looking for any of it. It came up the stairs to me, humming, with a scab on its knee. The lullaby was the third Thursday. By then Lucy and I had a rhythm. She'd arrive early before her aunt or whoever dropped her off had even parked, and she'd go straight to the piano and start pressing keys in the pattern I'd shown her, and I'd let her. And then we'd do 10 minutes of actual work and 30 minutes of me answering whatever question had accumulated in her over the week. She had a lot of questions. Where does the sound go after it stops? Why are some keys black? If you played the piano in space, would anyone hear it? Her father, I gathered, worked long hours and answered these questions badly or not at all, and her aunt answered them like a woman being timed. And I answered them like they were the most important questions anyone had ever asked me, which, some weeks, they were. That third Thursday she was tired. There were shadows under her eyes that a 7-year-old shouldn't have earned yet, and she didn't run to the piano. She climbed onto the bench like it cost her something. Didn't sleep, she said before I asked. Bad dream. She shrugged, which meant yes. You don't have to tell me. It's not a scary dream, she said. It's just the same one. She put her hands on the keys and didn't play. There's a lady and she sings and I can't see her face, and when I wake up I'm still hearing it, but I can't. I can't get it right when I try. Something moved at the back of my neck, not yet the thing itself, just its shadow crossing over. Get what right? The song, and then without deciding to, the way children do, she hummed it. I've tried since to describe what happened in me, and I can't do it honestly without sounding like the kind of story I don't believe in. So I'll just tell you what was true in my body. My hands went cold. Not metaphor, cold, actual, the blood leaving them. The room tilted very slightly, the way the porch swing tilted, patient, waiting to see if I'd notice. And I noticed. Because I knew the song. Not knew it the way you know a song off the radio. Knew it the way you know your own handwriting. It was a lullaby my grandmother had sung, then my mother, then, one time in a place I had spent 6 years not letting myself return to me. I had sung it exactly once as an adult, to a child I didn't know, in a situation I have never told a living soul about, on a date I keep the way other people keep a scar, without looking at it directly, but aware of it always, the skin around it a little tighter than the rest. Lucy hummed 4 bars and stopped. That's all I can get, she said. Then it goes away. Where did you hear it? My voice came out level, I don't know how. The lady, she said like I was slow, in the dream. But before the dream. Someone must have, your mom maybe, or your. I don't have a mom. She said it plainly, the way she'd said the middle keys were black, a fact about the world. She died when I was a baby, that's why Aunt Deb takes me places. She pressed a key, let it ring. Dad says I couldn't remember her even if I tried, I was too little, but I remember the song, so I think he's wrong. I think I do remember something. I sat down on the bench next to her, because I wasn't sure my legs would keep holding the rest of me up. Can you teach me the rest, she asked, of the song so I can finish it in the dream? And this is the part I've never been able to explain to myself. I said no. I said, I don't know that one, sweetheart. And I watched my own mouth do it. And it was the first time in my adult life I had looked a child in the face and lied to protect myself instead of them. And I felt the wrongness of it settle into me like a stone going down through water, slow, final, out of reach. Because if I taught her the rest of the song, she would take it home, and someone at home would hear it, and someone at home would ask where she learned it, and the whole careful architecture of being no one, of the blue house and the tilted swing in October kept at arm's length, all of it would come down, because there was only one place on this earth Lucy Marsh could have learned those 4 bars, and it was the one place I had crossed 1,100 miles to never stand in again. Okay, Lucy said, disappointed but not surprised. Children get told no about impossible things all the time. Can we do the scales instead? Yeah, I managed. Yeah, let's do the scales. She played C major up and down, tongue out, and got it right for the first time, and looked up at me shining, waiting for me to be proud of her. And I was, God help me. I was so proud of her and so frightened at the same time that I had to turn toward the window so she wouldn't see my face do something I couldn't govern. Down on Water Street, the afternoon was going gold. A man was crossing toward the hardware store below us, tall, a little stooped in the way of men who carry things for a living. A girl's pink raincoat folded over one arm even though it wasn't raining, the way a person carries a thing they're always ready for. I didn't know him yet. I want to be precise about that. I did not know, watching him from the window with Lucy's clean small scale ringing behind me, that I was looking at the second half of my own life crossing a street toward a hardware store, carrying his daughter's coat in case the weather turned. I only knew the song, and the song was enough to tell me the quiet years were over. I didn't sleep that night either. I sat on the tilted swing until the cold drove me in, and then I sat at the kitchen table with the one lamp on, and did the thing I'd promised myself I was done doing, which was go back. 6 years, to the day I keep like a scar. I'm not going to give you all of it yet. I couldn't that night, I could only get near it in pieces, the way you approach a fire, close and then back, close and then back. But I'll give you the shape, because you'll need the shape to understand everything that came after, and because Lucy's 4 bars had already made keeping it to myself a kind of lie I was too tired to keep telling. 6 years ago, I was not a person who moved to towns off the backs of postcards. 6 years ago, I was a person standing on the wrong side of a railing, on a specific evening in October having decided something. I won't dress it up. I'd decided something, and I'd chosen the date on purpose because it was my mother's birthday and I have a sense of symmetry that has never once served me, and I was standing where a person stands when they've decided that, and I remember this with an awful clarity, I was calm. That's the part no one warns you about. The calm. I had stopped negotiating. I was just waiting for my own nerve. And then, below me and to the left, on the road, there was a sound that a car makes exactly once and never again. I've thought about it 10,000 times, whether I'd have gone through with it if the accident hadn't happened. I don't have an answer, and I've stopped requiring myself to have one. What I know is that the sound reached in and grabbed the animal part of me, the part that runs toward, and before I had decided anything my body was over the railing the safe way and down the embankment, and I was running toward a car that had come off the road and folded itself around the base of a light pole, and there was a woman in it, and she was alive, and she was not going to stay that way, and in the back, in a car seat, upside down and screaming, there was a baby. I got the baby out first, you do. The woman told me to. She was conscious enough for that, and her whole face was one instruction, the baby, and I got the door and I got the straps and I got the child out, and she was unhurt, not a mark on her, just screaming the way the very small scream which is with the whole body. And I couldn't get the woman out. I tried. I want that known. I tried until my hands didn't work and it wasn't a thing that could be done, and she knew it before I did. And she stopped asking me to and started asking me for something else. Stay with her, she said, meaning the baby. Sing to her. She won't, she can't be alone. Please sing to her. I didn't know any songs. That's what I thought, kneeling in the broken glass with a stranger's dying wife looking at me. I don't know any songs. And then my grandmother's lullaby came up out of some floor of me I'd forgotten I had, the one my mother sang. And I held that screaming baby against my chest and I sang it, 4 bars and then the rest, over and over into her hair, and she quieted. She quieted. She fisted her hand in my collar and went quiet and looked up at me. And the woman in the car watched her daughter go quiet in a stranger's arms, and something in her face let go. And she said thank you. And she said a name I didn't keep because I couldn't. And then the sirens were close, and there were lights and hands, and I did the thing I have never forgiven and never regretted in equal measure. I gave the baby to a paramedic, and I walked away. I didn't give my name. I didn't stay for the questions. I walked back up the embankment in the dark, past the railing I'd been standing on, and I kept walking, and somewhere in that walking I understood that I was not, after all, going to do the thing I'd decided to do. Not that night. Not, as it turned out, ever, though I didn't know the ever yet. That night I only knew that I'd been needed completely, by a woman and a child. In the last minutes anyone would ever need me that much, and that being needed like that had reached into the calm and shattered it, and I could not now unknow that I was the kind of person a dying woman would trust with her baby. It's a terrible thing to learn about yourself at the worst possible moment. It saved my life. Both those things are true, and I've stopped trying to make them agree. I never learned if the baby made it or the mother. The mother I knew about, you don't come back from that, but I mean whether she held on to the ambulance, whether there was a chance, whether the child had someone. I left before I could learn. For 6 years I have not let myself find out, because finding out meant standing again on the wrong side of that railing in my mind, and I could not do it and stay upright. And now, a 7-year-old was humming 4 bars of my grandmother's lullaby in a room above a hardware store, and calling it a dream, and telling me she didn't have a mom. I sat at the kitchen table until the lamp seemed to dim against the window, which meant morning was coming up behind it. I didn't cry. I want to be honest about that too. I'd have felt better if I could have, but the thing was too big for crying. It was in the load-bearing walls. I just sat, and let the shape of it stand there in the kitchen with me, and understood that the town where I'd come to be no one had, with the terrible economy of small towns, handed me back the one person on earth I had walked away from. The only question left was whether her father knew, whether he was looking, whether he'd spent 6 years the way I'd spent them, circling one date, keeping it like a scar, and whether, if he ever found me, it would be with gratitude or with the fury a man is owed, at the woman who held his wife's hand at the end and then didn't leave a name for him to thank, or to hate, or simply to know. I found out his name the next morning, from a flyer in the hardware store window, because of course I did. Marsh & Son Carpentry, custom work, repairs, restoration. Ask for Adam. Adam Marsh, Lucy's father, the man with the pink raincoat over his arm. I stood on Water Street in the early cold and read his name, and understood that being no one had lasted exactly 6 days, and that whatever I was going to be in Marren Bay, it was going to have his name in it, and his daughter's dream, and a song I should never have let her hear the first 4 bars of, because now she was going to spend every Thursday climbing onto that bench and asking me to teach her the rest. And I was going to spend every Thursday learning, what kind of coward I actually was. My name is Nell, which I haven't told you, because for a while there it didn't feel like it belonged to the person telling this. Nell Arties. It was my grandmother's name before it was mine, the same grandmother of the lullaby, and I'd spent a decade being called Eleanor by people who wanted me to be more serious than I was, and I'd come to Marren Bay and given Peel the short version out of pure fatigue, and so to the whole town I was Nell, which turned out to be the truest thing about me, and I hadn't even meant it. I tell you this now because it's the name Adam Marsh first said, and he said it wrong. He came up the stairs on a Thursday, not Lucy's Thursday, a different one which I noticed and pretended not to, and he stood in the doorway filling it, and he said, "You're the piano teacher. Nella." Nell. Nell, sorry. He didn't come in. He had the trick some large men have of making themselves smaller in a doorway, shoulders turned, one hand rubbing the back of his neck. Up close he was younger than the stoop suggested, and older than his daughter's father should have looked, if that makes sense, a man who'd been aged by a specific thing rather than by time evenly applied. Adam Marsh. Lucy's dad. I wanted to. Deb usually does the handoffs, but she's got her own kid sick this week, so it's me. She's a good student, I said. Which was true, and also the safest sentence I owned. She talks about you. He said it like a confession he wasn't sure he should be making. At dinner, she's not a big talker, Lucy, since her mom, she keeps a lot in. But Thursdays she comes home and I get the whole download. What you said, what the piano did. He almost smiled. It cost him something, the almost smile, I could see it cost him. You showed her the inside of it, the hammers, she drew it. There's a drawing of the inside of your piano on my refrigerator right now. I don't know what I'd expected of Adam Marsh. In the 2 days I'd spent knowing his name and not his face. I think I'd braced for a grief you could see, some visible wound. A man carrying his tragedy out front where the town could tend to it. He wasn't that. He was worse, in a way that undid me a little. He was a man who had folded the whole thing down small and carried it internally, and gone on making custom cabinetry and packing a pink raincoat. And the only place it showed was in the 2-second delay before every smile, the toll booth his face paid before letting anything through. I had held his wife's hand while she died. I was almost certain of it. There is no world in which 2 women sing my grandmother's lullaby to 2 different dying mothers' babies on 2 different October nights. And here he was in my doorway thanking me for showing his daughter the inside of a piano, and I could not tell him. And the not telling opened up in front of me like the whole rest of my life. I'm glad she's enjoying it, I said. She wants to know if she can do more days. He shifted the weight of himself. I know you're probably full, but she asked me to ask. That's a big deal, her asking for something. I didn't want to be the guy who didn't ask. Thursdays and Mondays, I heard myself say. I had no one on Mondays. I had, in fact, decided to keep Mondays empty on purpose, as a hedge against getting pulled into anyone's life. If that works. Yeah, relief moved through him, plain and human. Yeah, that works, thank you, what do I? Same as Thursdays, don't worry about it. No, I pay for what she gets, something firmed in him. That's not I pay for what she gets. What's the extra day? We negotiated it. And it was such an ordinary negotiation. 2 people over the price of piano lessons. And the whole time I was thinking I sang to your daughter while your wife died and you don't know, and I can't tell you, and I'm going to see you twice a week now, forever. In this small blue town. He counted out bills from a worn fold and set them on the piano lid, and his hands were a carpenter's hands, scarred and careful. And I thought of the hands I'd used to try to get his wife out of the car, and how they hadn't been enough, and I had to look at the window. You okay? He asked. He'd caught it. He was, I'd learn, a noticer. Grief makes some people blind and some people can suddenly see everything, and he was the second kind. Long week, I said. Yeah, he said, and let it be a lie without pushing on it, which was its own kind of kindness, and he left. And I sat down on the piano bench where his daughter sat, and I put my hands flat on the missing low A, and I stayed like that until it was dark. Marren Bay closed around me the way small towns do, which is to say slowly and then all at once. For 6 days I'd managed to be no one. By the end of the 3rd week I was Nell the piano teacher, and by the end of the 5th I was Nell who rent Spiel's rooms and Nell who bought the Holly's place and Nell who's so good with the Marsh girl. And every one of those handles was a rope, and the town threw them over me one at a time until I was moored whether I liked it or not. There was Deb, Lucy's aunt, who recovered from her sick kids and started staying for the first 10 minutes of lessons again, and who I liked more each time despite myself. She had the particular exhaustion of a woman raising her own 3+ half-raising her dead sister's daughter, and she carried it without asking for credit. And one Monday she stayed the whole lesson, and afterward in the doorway, she said the thing that I'd been afraid someone would eventually say. "You're good for her." Deb watched Lucy through the window below, waiting on the step. "I mean it. She's been, you don't know what she was like, after she stopped talking for a while, like altogether. The doctor said it happens, kids do that, but Adam," she stopped, recalibrated. Deb was always recalibrating, deciding in real time how much of the family to hand a stranger. Adam took it hard. He blames himself for the whole thing and there's no talking him out of it, and Lucy going quiet on top of it, that about finished him. So when she comes home from here talking, when she draws pianos on his fridge, "You did that. You should know you did that." "She did that," I said. "I just opened the lid." "Sure." Deb wasn't buying my modesty and didn't pretend to. Then casually, too casually, in the way people slide the real question in under a false floor, "You've got no kids of your own?" "No." "No." "Sorry, none of my business." "It's a small town," I said. "Everything's everyone's business. I've learned that much." She laughed. "You've learned fast." And then she said in a lower register, the register people use for the truth, "It's a good place to land, Nell, whatever you were landing from. Nobody here's going to ask you the hard version if you don't want to tell it, but they'll all be there if you fall." She looked at me a beat too long. "That's the trade. You give up your secrets in exchange for people showing up when the ceiling comes down. Some people can't make that trade. They leave. But you seem like you could use some people showing up." I didn't answer that, because there wasn't an answer that wouldn't have started a much longer conversation, and Deb, being Deb, didn't make me. She gathered Lucy and went, and I stood at the window and watched her take her sister's daughter's hand, and I thought about the trade she'd named, and I understood that I could not make it. Not the ordinary way. Because the secret they'd want in exchange for showing up was the one secret that would make them unable to look at me, or worse, unable to stop. Here is how the crack started. I want to get it exactly right because I've replayed it enough to have worn it smooth, and the smooth version is a lie. The true version is uglier and more human, and I'd rather tell you that one. It started because Lucy got the song wrong on purpose. 4th Monday. She climbed onto the bench, and instead of the scales she hummed her 4 bars, and then she made up a 5th and 6th bar, wrong but confidently wrong. A child filling in a gap with invention, and she looked up at me, sly, testing. "That's not right," I said before I could stop myself. She lit up like I'd handed her something. "So you do know it." You said you didn't, but you said that's not right, so you have to know what right is." 7 years old and she'd laid a trap and I'd walked into it with both feet. She wasn't smug about it. She was hungry about it, which was worse. "Please. I've been trying and I can only get the start, and then in the dream the lady sings the rest and I wake up and it's gone. If you teach me, I can finish it." "Then maybe the dream will." She stopped, chose a different word than the one she'd been reaching for. "Then maybe I'll get to keep it." Keep it. A 7-year-old asking me to help her keep the only piece of her mother she thought she had, which she thought was a dream, which was actually a real night I'd knelt in glass and sung to her while the woman who made her went out of the world. And I want to tell you I held the line. I want to tell you I was strong, that I said no again and protected all of us. But Deb's voice was still in the room. She seemed like you could use some people showing up, and Lucy's face was doing the thing faces do when they've decided you're the person who can give them something no one else will, and I was so tired of being a coward. 2 weeks of being a coward twice a week. And I thought, with the specific stupidity of the exhausted, it's just a lullaby. Half the grandmothers in the country probably sing something close to it. I can teach her the song and it doesn't have to mean anything. It doesn't have to lead anywhere. That's the lie the smooth version tells, that I thought it through and made a reasoned mistake. I didn't. I just couldn't stand her face any longer, and I put my hands on the keys and I played the lullaby. All of it. The 4 bars she had and the rest, slow so she could follow, and I sang it under my breath the way you do when your hands are teaching something your mouth knows better, and Lucy went completely still beside me, and when I finished she didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she said in a very small voice, "That's it, that's the whole thing." And she started to cry, not upset, the other kind, the kind that comes when something you'd lost turns out to have been in the house the whole time. That's what she sings. That's exactly what she sings. "Lucy, play it again." I played it again. God forgive me, I played it again, and she hummed along and got it, all of it, locked it into herself the way children lock things, permanent, and I watched a piece of the worst night of my life go into a little girl as a gift, and I could not tell whether I'd done something beautiful or something unforgivable, and 6 years later I still can't, and I've decided that's just the shape of the thing and I'll carry it that shape. "Where's it from?" she asked, wiping her face with the heel of her hand. "The song. Real, I mean, not the dream. You know it, so somebody taught you." "Who?" "My grandmother," I said. It was the first fully true thing I'd told her about it. "So it's a real song, it's not just mine." She frowned, working something out. "But then how does the lady in my dream know it if it's your grandma's? Unless—" and here she stopped and I watched a 7-year-old brush right up against the edge of the actual truth, close enough to feel the heat off it. "Unless somebody sang it to me, when I was a baby, and I remember even though Dad says I can't." "Maybe," I said. My voice was not my own. "Somebody sang me your grandma's song when I was a baby," Lucy said slowly, "and I kept it." She looked up at me with her mother's eyes. I hadn't known until that second that they were her mother's eyes, but they were. I'd looked into them once in the dark upside down in a car seat, and she said, "That's a nice thing. Whoever it was, that was a nice thing to do." I said, "Let's do the scales," in a voice that I'm amazed came out at all, and she mercifully let me, and played C major up and down with her whole small heart in it. And I sat beside her and understood that I had just made the thing I'd been trying to prevent inevitable. Because she was going to go home and hum the whole lullaby now. And Adam Marsh, who noticed everything, was going to hear his daughter humming a complete song she'd never been able to finish. A song from the dream she had about her dead mother singing to her, and he was going to ask where she learned the rest. And Lucy, who did not lie, was going to tell him, "Nell taught me. Nell knows it. It's her grandma's song. She went home and hummed it." I know because Adam came up the stairs the next afternoon, not Lucy's day, not any day, a Wednesday, wrong on purpose. And he stood in the doorway, not turning his shoulders in this time, taking up the whole of it, and his face had gone past the toll booth and left the gate hanging open, and he said, "Where did she learn the rest of the song?" I'd had a night to prepare, and I had prepared nothing, because there was nothing to prepare. There was only the truth and its several disguises, and I stood at the window with my back to the light so he couldn't read me, and I said, "She'd been trying to finish a tune. I helped her finish it." "That tune?" He came in. He didn't mean to, I think he just needed to be closer to the question. "Nell, that tune. She's had that in her head since she used to hum a piece of it and she'd cry because she couldn't get the rest, and I couldn't help her. I didn't know it, nobody knew it. Deb didn't know it, her grandparents didn't know it. We thought she'd made it up, a dream thing. And now she comes home and she can sing the whole thing front to back, and she says Nell taught me. It's Nell's grandmother's song." His voice did something on the last part, cracked along a grain. "So I need you to tell me. Where is that song from? because Jess used to. He stopped, Jess. The name I hadn't kept. He'd said it and it landed in the room and he heard it land and his eyes changed. Because Jess used to what? I said, very quietly because I already knew, and I needed to hear whether he did. Nothing. He shut it. 6 years of practice at shutting it. But it was too late. He'd opened the door and we'd both seen through it. And he stood in the middle of my rented room with sawdust on his sleeve and his dead wife's name in the air, and looked at me like a man who has just heard a footstep in a house he thought was empty. Nell, he said, how do you know that song? And I understood that we had arrived, weeks early and with no warning at the edge of the thing. That I could lie, I was good at it now. I'd been practicing on his daughter. Or I could do the one thing I'd crossed 1,100 miles to avoid, which was stand in front of a grieving man and hand him the worst and best night of both our lives. I looked at him. The toll booth was gone from his face. There was just the man, wide open, terrified of an answer he couldn't name. Adam, I said, I think you should sit down. He didn't sit down. I've noticed that people never do the thing you tell them to do at the moment everything's about to change. You say sit down because you've seen it in films and because your own legs have gone, and the other person stays standing out of some animal refusal, as if sitting would make it real. Adam stayed standing. He put one hand on the piano, the honey-colored lid, where he'd counted out bills 2 weeks before, and he waited. And I could hear him breathing, and I had no idea how to start, so I started wrong. I need you to let me get all the way to the end before you decide anything, I said. Can you do that? You're scaring me. I know, I'm sorry, can you do it anyway? He nodded once, the way you agree to surgery. I turned around to face him, because he deserved my face for this even though it was the last thing I wanted to give. 6 years ago, I said, I was in a city 1,100 miles from here, in October, and there was an accident on a road below a bridge I was standing on. A car went off the road. I watched it reach him in stages. First nothing, a man braced for a confession about a song, receiving instead a road, a car, unable to fit them together. Then the first thread pulling taut, then his hand coming off the piano lid. There was a woman in the car, I said, and a baby in the back in a car seat upside down. Stop, not angry, pleading. Stop, don't. You said you'd let me get to the end. His jaw worked. He didn't say anything else. He'd gone the color of the drizzle. I got the baby out first. The woman told me to. She was awake enough to tell me to. I couldn't get her out. I tried. I want you to know I tried until my hands didn't work, but the car was. My voice went somewhere I couldn't follow it for a second, and I waited for it to come back, and it came back thinner. It couldn't be done, and she knew before I did. And she stopped asking me to get her out, and she asked me to stay with the baby. She said the baby couldn't be alone. She said sing to her. Adam had stopped breathing in any regular way. He was taking air in pieces. I didn't know any songs, I said. That's what I thought. Kneeling there, I don't know any songs. And then my grandmother's lullaby came up out of me, the one my mother used to, and I held the baby against me and I sang it, all of it, over and over. And she quieted. She grabbed my collar and she went quiet and she looked at me. And I made myself say it was ode. And the woman in the car watched her daughter go quiet and something in her face let go and she said thank you. And she told me a name. And what name? His voice was almost nothing. What name did she say? I hadn't kept it. 6 years I'd told myself I hadn't kept it, that the trauma had eaten it, that it was gone. But standing there in front of him, it came back the way the lullaby had come back in the car, up out of a floor I'd forgotten I had. Lucy, I said. She said, this is Lucy. And she said, tell her. And I stopped, because this part I had genuinely never let myself hold, and it was heavier than all the rest. She said tell her I stayed as long as I could. Adam made a sound. I'm not going to try to spell it. It was the sound a house makes when a load-bearing wall finally gives, low and structural and terrible. And he did sit down then, Not because I'd told him to, but because the floor came up to meet him. He went down onto the piano bench where his daughter sat twice a week, and he put both scarred hands over his face, and he stayed like that. I didn't touch him. Every part of me wanted to, and I didn't, because I hadn't earned it yet. I'd only just handed him the weight, and he needed to hold it alone for a minute before anyone helped him carry it, if he'd even let me, which I doubted. When he took his hands down, his face was wet and furious and grateful all at once, all three, none of them winning, and that, the three of them at war, was how I knew he believed me. If he'd only been grateful, I'd have suspected him of politeness. The fury was how I knew it was real. "You walked away," he said. There it was, under the gratitude, the true thing. The thing I'd been afraid of for 6 years without ever getting to hear it out loud. "Yes. You held my wife's hand while she died, and you held my daughter, and my wife gave you a message for Lucy. Tell her I stayed as long as I could. She gave you that, and you—" His voice climbed and cracked and dropped. "You walked away. You didn't leave a name. 6 years. I spent 6 years. Do you understand what I put out? There were flyers. There was a hole. The paramedics said a woman. They said a woman got the baby out and sang to her and was gone before we got there. No name, wouldn't stay, and I looked, Nell, I looked for you for years. I wanted to." And here the fury broke off and the gratitude flooded in and drowned it briefly. "I wanted to thank you. I wanted to know who Lucy's alive because of you. She got out of that car because a stranger climbed down an embankment, and you never let me." "I know. Why, just the one word, why did you walk away?" And this was the part I'd have given anything not to reach. Because the honest answer to why did you walk away was because if I'd stayed, I'd have had to explain what I was doing on that bridge, and I could not say that to him. Not then. Not with his wife's name still warm in the room. There are truths you can hand a person and truths you have to earn the right to hand them, and that one I hadn't earned. So I told him a smaller true thing, and let him think it was the whole thing. "Because I couldn't hold it," I said. "Any of it. I want to be honest with you, I was not a well person 6 years ago. I was as close to the bottom as a person gets. And I climbed down that embankment and did the one useful thing I've maybe ever done. And then I could not stand in the lights and the questions and be a hero, be thanked, have my picture. I could not. I didn't have it in me. I barely had walking away in me. So I walked away, and I've regretted it and not regretted it every single day since, both at once. And I moved here to a town off the back of my dead grandmother's postcards to be no one. And 6 days and a little girl came up those stairs humming 4 bars of a song I sang to her once in a wrecked car. And I have been losing my mind ever since, trying to decide whether to tell you or take it to my grave." The room was very quiet. Down on Water Street a truck changed gears. "Her dream," Adam said finally, slowly, putting it together the way his daughter put things together, the resemblance almost unbearable. "The lady who sings and she can't see her face, that's not Jess." He looked up at me. "She thinks it's Jess. She's always thought I let her think it was some memory of her mom, because what was I going to say? And it's not, it's you. She remembers you singing to her, in the car." "I think so," I said. "Yes." "She was 14 months old." He said it like an accusation and a wonder at the same time. "How does she? The doctors said she couldn't possibly remember. She was 2. "Trauma remembers," I said. "The song got in under everything. She doesn't remember it as a memory. She remembers it as a dream, but it's the same thing, it's in her. I put it there without meaning to, 6 years ago, and I put it there again on purpose on Monday when I finally taught her the rest, and I don't know if that was the kindest or the cruelest thing I've ever done." Adam stood up off the bench. He crossed to the window to where I'd been standing, and he looked down at the street the way I'd looked down at him carrying a raincoat, and for a long time he didn't say anything, and I let him not say anything, because I had run out of things I was allowed to say. "I don't know what to do with this," he said to the window. "I want you to know that. I can't tell you right now if I'm grateful or if I'm both. I'm so angry I can't see, and I owe you everything, and those are both true, and I can't make them." "They don't have to agree," I said. "I've been trying to make my two agree for 6 years. They don't. You just carry them both." He turned around, looked at me for a long moment, the whole complicated freight of it in his face. "Does she need to know," he asked, "Lucy, that the dream's not Jess, that it's you?" He shook his head slowly. "God, I don't even, how do you tell a 7-year-old that?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "I've been telling myself no, that it would take something from her. She thinks she has a memory of her mother singing. If we take that away and hand her the stranger who was there when your mother died, that's not a trade in her favor. But I've been telling myself no because it's easier for me, and I don't trust my no anymore. So, I think that's yours to decide, not mine. She's yours." "She's mine," he agreed, and something in the way he said it, "she's mine," the whole of his life in 2 words, undid the last of the professional distance I'd been standing behind, and I had to look at the piano. He left not long after. He didn't thank me and he didn't rage at me, he was past both. He just stopped at the door and stood in it the way he had the first day, shoulders turned, making himself small, and he said, "I need some time with this. Can you, the lessons, can she still come? I don't want to take that from her, whatever else. She's happy here, that's not," he struggled. "That's not nothing to me, her being happy. Even now, especially now." "She can still come," I said, "as long as you want her to." "Okay." He looked at me one more time, and there was something in it I couldn't read and wouldn't be able to read for a while. "Okay, Nell." And then he went down the stairs, carrying it, and I sat down on the bench still warm from where he'd sat, and I finally cried, the crying that had been too big 2 weeks ago now let out at last, because the secret was gone, the worst was done, and whatever came next it would at least be the truth's version of next, not the lies. He didn't come back for 11 days. Lucy came. Twice, Monday and Thursday, dropped off by Deb, who didn't know I could tell she didn't know. Deb couldn't have kept it off her face, which meant Adam hadn't told anyone, was holding it alone, which was so exactly the kind of thing he'd do that it made my chest hurt. Lucy played her scales and asked her questions and hummed the whole lullaby now, front to back, unconsciously, the way you hum a thing that's fully yours, and every time she did it I had to teach through a closed throat. On the second Thursday, she stopped in the middle of a scale and looked at me sideways and said, "Did something happen with my dad?" "Why do you ask?" "He's being weird, he keeps looking at me. Like," she scrunched her face, hunting the word, "like he does on the anniversary, in October." The looking, she played a wrong note and didn't fix it. "It's not October. 7 years old. Nothing gets past them. Everything gets past adults and nothing gets past the children, and we spend our whole lives with it backwards." "Grown-ups get weird sometimes," I said. "It usually passes." "Is it about me?" "No," I said, which was the first thing I'd said to her in weeks that was cleanly, uncomplicatedly true, and I felt the relief of it out of all proportion. "It's not about anything you did. I promise you that." She accepted it, because I'd never lied to her about anything that mattered. The song didn't count. The song had been mine to hold, and she went back to her scale and fixed the wrong note without being told, which she'd never done before, and I marked it privately as a small good thing in a hard season, the first note she ever corrected on her own. On the 11th day, Adam came up the stairs. It was evening after hours, the light going gold on Water Street the way it had the first time I saw him crossing it. He knocked on the frame even though the door was open. He'd shaved, which I noticed and couldn't have told you why I noticed, and he had a folder under his arm, an actual paper folder, worn at the corners. "I've been thinking," he said. "For 11 days I've been thinking, and I couldn't come here until I'd figured out one thing, and I figured it out this morning, so. Okay. I'm not angry anymore." He said it carefully, like a man reading back a number to make sure he'd copied it right. "That's the thing I figured out. I was angry that you walked away, and I stayed angry for 11 days, and this morning I was making Lucy's lunch and she was humming the song Jess's song. I called it in my head for 6 years. And it turns out it's your grandmother's song and Jess must have heard it. From you, in the car. And loved it enough that it was the last thing he stopped, steadied. This morning Lucy was humming it and I thought, if Nell hadn't walked down that embankment, I wouldn't be making this lunch. There's no lunch, there's no humming, there's no Lucy. And a man who's angry at the person who gave him the whole rest of his daughter's life because she didn't stay to be thanked, that man's a fool. So I stopped. I decided to stop and I stopped. A breath. It wasn't easy. I'm telling you it wasn't easy, so you don't think I did it lightly. But it's done. I didn't trust myself to speak. He put the folder on the piano lid and opened it, and it was full of paper, flyers, printouts, a missing persons layout, except it wasn't a person who was missing. It was me, 6 years of a man trying to find the woman who saved his daughter. Do you know this woman? She saved a child's life on October 14th, and we would like to thank her. A police sketch, bad, nothing like me and completely like me. Newspaper clippings. A whole archive of the search I'd made him run by leaving. I want you to have this, he said. I don't need it anymore, I found you. Or you found Lucy found you, really Lucy and a song. But I don't need to be looking anymore and I don't want it in the house. And I thought, he looked at me, and there was the thing in his face again, the thing I couldn't read except now, in the gold light with the folder open between us, I could read it, and it frightened me more than his anger had. It was hope, just the beginning of it, the very first unwilling edge of it. I thought you should see how hard I looked, he said. So you'd know. When you walked away thinking nobody would want to find you, somebody wanted to find you for 6 years. That's all. I just wanted you to know that. And he closed the folder and left it there and went down the stairs, and I stood over 6 years of a stranger's search for me, in the gold light, and understood that being no one was not just over, it had never really been possible. Somebody had been looking for me the whole time. I had crossed 1,100 miles to be unfindable, and a 14-month-old baby had kept my grandmother's lullaby folded up inside herself for 6 years, and unfolded it in a room above a hardware store. And here was her father's whole archive of wanting to find me, sitting on a piano missing its low A. You don't get to be no one. That's what the folder taught me. You only get to decide whether the people who find you at your best or your worst. And Adam Marsh had found me at neither. He'd found me in the middle, teaching his daughter scales, and he'd decided, standing in this room, to be grateful instead of angry, which is the hardest decision a grieving person ever makes, and he'd made it while making a child's lunch. I took the folder home. I put it on the kitchen table under the one lamp, next to the shoebox of my grandmother's postcards, and I sat between the two of them, the dead women who'd brought me here and the living man who'd been looking for me the whole time. And for the first time since October 6 years ago, I let myself wonder if I'd been wrong about what I'd come to Marren Bay to do. I'd come to disappear. And the town, with its terrible economy, had handed me the one thing that makes disappearing impossible. It had handed me people who'd already refused to let me go. The thaw between Adam and me didn't announce itself. That's the part I'd have gotten wrong if I were inventing it. There was no single afternoon where the weather turned. There were only small permissions, granted one at a time, so slowly that I couldn't have told you the day we stopped being the woman who walked away and the man she walked away from, and started being something we didn't have a word for yet. He began coming up the stairs for the handoffs himself. Deb noticed before I did. He's driving her Thursdays now, she said one Monday, staying past her 10 minutes the way she'd started doing again. Adam, he rearranged a whole job so he could do the Thursday run. You know how hard it is to get that man to rearrange anything. He's got the soul of a train timetable. She watched me too closely. Something's different with him since about a month back. I want to say lighter, but that's not it. He's not lighter. He's carrying the same thing. He's just not carrying it alone anymore, is how it looks from where I stand, and I can't figure out who's carrying the other end. She let that sit. You wouldn't know anything about that. He's a private man, I said. You'd know better than me, said Deb, which meant she didn't believe me and would let it go for now and had filed it. And Deb's filing system was the town's memory, and I understood I was on borrowed time with her. Because here was the thing neither Adam nor I had solved: what Lucy would be told, and when, and by whom. We circled it for weeks. He'd stay after the Thursday lesson, 10 minutes, then 20. Then Lucy sent down to wait on the step reading a comic while her father and her piano teacher stood at the window not quite deciding the shape of her life. If we tell her, he said one evening, she loses her mom again. Right now she thinks the dream is Jess. It's the one piece she's got. We take that and hand her the accident, the car. I can't work out if that's a gift or he didn't finish. He'd started not finishing sentences around me, trusting me to walk out to the end of them, which was its own kind of intimacy. And if we don't tell her, I said, she builds her whole self around a memory that isn't the true one. And she finds out at 15 or 20 from the wrong person in the wrong way that everyone knew and nobody said. I've been on the receiving end of everyone knew and nobody said. It's the loneliest thing there is. I wouldn't do it to her. He looked at me. You've got your own version of that, the thing you won't say, the real reason you were on that bridge. I went still. I'm not asking, he said quickly. I want to be clear. I'm not, you told me you weren't well and I heard that and I'm not going to pick at it. But I've spent 6 years reading Lucy's silences, and I know the shape of a person holding a bigger stone than the one they've shown you. You showed me the accident. There's a stone under the accident. You don't have to hand it to me. I just want you to know I can see there's one there and I'm not scared of it, and when you want to set it down, there's a place here to set it down. He picked up his jacket. That's all. I'll see you Thursday. I didn't sleep that night either, but it was a different not sleeping. The old kind was a wall. This was a door I hadn't decided whether to open. We told Lucy on a Sunday together in the blue house, because Adam decided, and he was right, that it shouldn't happen in the room where she was happy. He didn't want the piano to become the place where the world got heavier. So they came to me, to the house with the tilted swing, and I made cocoa I didn't know how to make, and Lucy drank it anyway to be polite, which told me she'd sensed something was coming, because polite wasn't her default. Adam did most of it. I'd offered to, and he'd said no. Gently, she needs to hear the frame of it from me, then you can give her the rest, and he was right about that too. He was right about her in a way I was still learning to be. You know your dream, he said, the lady who sings. Lucy nodded, wary, holding the cocoa in both hands. You always thought that was Mom, and I let you think that because I thought it was too, but it wasn't Mom, Luce. Mom didn't know that song. He took a breath I could hear from across the room. When you were a baby, there was a car accident. You were in the car. Mom was too, and it was very bad, and Mom, that's the night we lost Mom. You know that part. But there was someone else there. A person who wasn't supposed to be there, who saw it happen, and who climbed all the way down to the car to help. And she got you out. She got you out of your car seat when you were upside down and scared, and she held you, and she... He couldn't do the last part. He looked at me. It was mine to give. She sang to you, I said. Your dream lady. She sang you a song her grandmother used to sing so you wouldn't be scared, and you kept it. All these years you kept it inside you and you didn't know where it came from, so your heart made it a dream about your mom because that's who you wanted it to be. My voice was doing badly. I let it. She deserved to see it cost me. But it wasn't your mom singing, Lucy. It was me. The room was very quiet. She looked at me over the rim of the mug, and I watched a 7-year-old, 8 now. She'd had a birthday, take a piece of the machinery of her own heart apart to see how it worked. You were there, she said slowly. When Mom died, you saw it. Yes. And you got me out. Her brow did the thing her father's did, the working it out crease. And you sang me your grandma's song, and then the crease deepened, and then you went away, and you didn't tell anyone. And Dad looked for you for a really long time and couldn't find you. She wasn't accusing, she was assembling. And then I came up the stairs for piano and I was humming and you knew it was me. That day I wanted to see inside the piano, you already knew. Not that day, I said. The day you hummed the song, the third Thursday, that's when I knew. And you didn't tell me. No. Why? Here it was again, the child's why, the one that goes straight through the middle of you. But this time I had an answer that was clean, and I gave it to her whole. Because I was afraid it would hurt you, I said. I was afraid that if I told you the dream lady was a stranger from the worst night of your life instead of your mom, it would take something away from you. And I didn't want to take anything from you, Lucy. You've had enough taken. I thought about it every single Thursday and I kept deciding to be quiet to protect you. And then I realized I might be protecting myself instead, and I didn't trust that, so I told your dad, and your dad and I decided you were old enough to have the true thing instead of the nice thing. Because you're the kind of person who wants the true thing, aren't you? She thought about that with tremendous seriousness. Then she set down the cocoa. I'm not sad it's not Mom, she said, and it came out of her clear as a bell, and it undid both of us, Adam and me, at the exact same moment. I mean, I'm always sad about Mom. That's just always there, it's not a new sad. But the song, she looked at me. I always thought Mom sang it and then she went away and never came back. And that made the song kind of a going away song in my head, even though it's pretty. But if it was you and you sang it so I wouldn't be scared, then it's not a going away song. It's a staying song. You stayed, right? You stayed till I wasn't scared. Tell her I stayed as long as I could. Jess's message, that I'd carried 6 years and handed to Adam 11 days into believing, and here was her daughter, unprompted, arriving at the word stayed on her own, and I had to put my hand over my mouth. She had a message for you, I said when I could. Your mom, that night. She asked me to tell you something and I didn't stay, I never got to give it to you. She said, tell her I stayed as long as I could. Lucy took that in, nodded slowly. And then she did the thing children do that adults have forgotten how to do. She went straight to the heart of it with no detour. So Mom stayed as long as she could, she said, and then you stayed the rest, till I wasn't scared. She nodded again, filing it permanent. That's good. That's a good way for it to have been. Adam made a sound and turned toward the window. Lucy got up off the couch, crossed to me, and carefully, because she was careful with people, Deb had said, since she leaned against my side, the way a cat decides about you, and she said, can I still do Mondays and Thursdays? You can still do Mondays and Thursdays, I said, into her hair, which smelled of the same cheap shampoo the whole town used, and I held very still so as not to spook the moment, and across the room her father cried at the window, and I understood that we had done the hard thing and it had not broken her. It had done the opposite. She'd taken the worst night of her life and turned it into a staying song, at 8 years old, in a blue house that wasn't mine, and taught the 2 shattered adults in the room how to hold it. I'd like to tell you it was smooth after that. It wasn't, and I promised you the true version. Deb found out, and Deb was hurt. Not that it had happened, but that she'd been kept outside it, and she had earned better than being kept outside things, and she and Adam had a hard week that I heard about secondhand. There was a stretch where the town's memory system decided it had opinions about the piano teacher and the widower, and some of them were ugly, and I had to sit through Appeal who'd heard things and wanted, in his fussy kind way, to make sure I knew he didn't listen to that sort of talk while making very clear that the talk existed. There was the anniversary, the 1st October with me in the town, and I learned what Adam's looking was up close, and it was worse than Lucy had described, and also, with the 2 of us marking it together for the first time in 6 years each, survivable in a way it hadn't been alone. And there was the stone under the accident, that Adam had seen and not picked at. I set it down in November. On the bridge, there was a bridge in Marren Bay too, of course there was, over the inlet, and I found myself on it one gray afternoon not because I'd decided anything. I want to be clear, that person was gone, but because I understood I couldn't fully arrive in this life, while there was a thing about it Adam thought he knew the frame of and didn't know the center. So I told him. I told him why I'd been on the first bridge, 6 years ago, on my mother's birthday, waiting for my own nerve. I told him the accident hadn't just saved Lucy. It had saved me, that the reason I couldn't stay for the questions wasn't only that I couldn't be a hero. It was that I couldn't explain what a person like me had been doing up there in the first place, and that I'd walked away from him and from the lights and from being thanked because I'd gone up there to end my life and come down having, by pure accident, found a reason to keep it. And that reason had been his daughter's small hand fisted in my collar. He didn't flinch. That's the thing I'll love him for longest past everything else. He didn't flinch and he didn't rush to fix it and he didn't make it about how glad he was I hadn't. He just took my hand on the bridge over the inlet and held it, the way I'd held his wife's hand, and he said, "So she saved you too, Lucy. You both saved each other and neither one of you knew it for 6 years. And then, after a while, I'm glad you came down that embankment for a lot of reasons. I didn't know until right now that one of them was you." We stood on the bridge until the cold drove us off it. The way the tilted swings cold used to drive me in. And then we went and got Lucy from Deb's, who'd started, grudgingly and then not grudgingly, to forgive us. And the three of us drove home in Adam's truck with the heater rattling, and Lucy hummed the staying song in the back, unconsciously, all the way, and neither of us told her to stop. I'll end where the title started, because the title was Lucy's, really, though she'll never know she named it. 2 years on, she's 10. She plays properly now, has an ear that isn't mine to take credit for, plays the lullaby at recitals and tells people it's her grandmother's song, and lets them assume she means her mother's mother, which is close enough to true that I've stopped correcting it. Adam and we're careful still. Both of us are careful with people. It's the thing we have most in common. But there's a toothbrush of mine in the blue house and a saw of his in my shed, and the swing has 2 chains the same length now because he fixed it one Sunday without being asked, so it hangs level, and I miss the tilt sometimes and haven't told him. Last October, on the 14th, I woke to the smell of pancakes, which is not a thing that happens in my house, because I can't make them and Adam pretends he can't either, though he plainly can. He was in my kitchen. Lucy was setting the table, too old now to be excited about it and doing it anyway. There were candles at breakfast, which made no sense until it did. "What is this?" I said. "It's the 14th, Adam said, not looking up from the pan, in the toll booth voice, the anniversary voice, except it had something new underneath it. "It's the day you came down the embankment. I've kept this date for 8 years as the worst day of my life, and I decided last night I've kept it wrong. It's not the worst day. The worst day was the day after, when I understood she wasn't coming back. The 14th, he turned the pancake, buying himself the second. The 14th is the day a stranger climbed down to a wrecked car and got my daughter out and sang her a song, and it turns out saved her own life at the same time and gave both of you back to me 6 years later in a room above a hardware store. That's not the worst day. That's the day everything that's good in my life right now actually started. I just had it filed wrong. So." He set the pancake in front of me. "Happy 14th. I'm changing what the date means. Lucy voted yes. Deb voted yes and then cried, which is a yes with interest. Lucy said from the table 10 and unimpressed and shining. He practiced that speech. He said it to the bathroom mirror. I heard him." "I did not." "You did. You said that's the day everything actually started 4 times. I could see he had. And I sat down at my own table in my own blue house with the level swing outside, and the two of them arguing about whether he'd rehearsed the speech that had just rearranged the worst day of all our lives into something we could bear to keep. And I thought about my grandmother's postcards and my mother's birthday and a railing 1,100 miles away, and the calm I'd felt up there, and how sure I'd been that no one would come looking, that I could be no one, that the date I'd chosen would be the last one. And here was a man who'd taken a different October date and spent 8 years keeping it like a scar, and had decided, in my kitchen, over pancakes, to keep it like a birthday instead. I don't know if it lasts. I want to be honest with you all the way to the end, the way I've tried to be the whole time. I don't know if Adam and I make it the distance, or if the carefulness we share turns out to be the thing that keeps us or the thing that ends us. I don't know if Lucy, at 15, forgives us for the year we knew and didn't say, even though we said it in the end. Nobody handing you a staying song gets to guarantee the staying. That's not how it works. Jess stayed as long as she could, and then she couldn't, and I stayed the rest that night. And whether any of us stays the rest of the years isn't a thing you get promised. But he remembered the date. That's what I keep. Of everything, the folder of 6 years of searching, the embankment, the song passed hand to hand down through dead women to a 14-month-old and back up into the light. The thing I keep is that a single father took the one date that had broken him, and standing at my stove with a pancake going cold, chose to remember it as the day it all started instead of the day it all ended. I hadn't expected that. Of all the things I braced for when a little girl came up the stairs humming, I never once braced for someone to take the worst day I'd given anyone and turn it, on purpose, into a day worth keeping candles for. That's the thing that changed everything. Not the accident, not the song, the remembering and what he chose to make it mean.